What it do? This is your brother Bishop of Bishop Zone TV. And today I want to discuss this powerful documentary. This documentary that I encourage every black person in America to watch. If you haven't watched anything, you need to watch this documentary called South to Black Power. South to Black Power is about Charles M. Blow, who's a former New York journalist, New York Times journalist, and he has a proposal for Black America. And it's a pretty big proposal. It's a pretty practical and realistic, and I use realistic loosely, but it's a practical solution to the problems that we're facing in America. And his proposal is for African Americans en masse from the North to the Midwest to the West Coast. He's advocating for black people to move back to the South. And he's encouraging black people to move to the South to upend the political power structure and reclaim the land and culture that they left behind. And he's proposing that black Americans en masse move to 9 southern states. Those states are Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, and Delaware. And for the sake of argument, I'm going to add DC to that list. It's not a state, but you understand why I add DC to this list as well. And why? Why is Charles M. Blow, who, by the way, lived in New York close to, I think, 20 years. And before New York, he lived in Detroit, but he's originally from the South himself. He's originally from Louisiana, but now he lives in Atlanta. He moved to Atlanta 4 years ago. So yes, so he's not only talking what he's preaching, but he's walking that walk too. But he's advocating for black people to move to those 9 states specifically because they have the highest percentage of black people in any state in America. That's why. There's strength in numbers. So he figures, hey, these states already have the highest percentage of black people in America. Why not add more black people to these states to, again, upend the political structure of these states and make some actual, real, impactful change? And I must say, me as a Pan-Africanist, as someone who would like for majority of black people, not all you Negroes, because I'm like Marcus Garvey. If y'all ain't doing nothing here in America, you're not any good in Africa. But somebody like me, who's a Pan-Africanist, who would love for black people, the right kind of right-minded people, to up and leave Babylon and go to Africa, I 1,000% support this brother here. I support the concept of black people en masse moving to the South. Because I'm going to tell you, when you look at the state of black America, and this is all over black America. Now, I'm not talking about individuals. I'm not even talking about a select group of black people in this country, but I'm talking about the collective, the larger collective of black America. When you look at the state of the collective in this country, it don't look too good. It don't look too good. It's stagnant. And it's not, this isn't about, oh, well, black culture is destroying black people. This is not a problem video. This is not a video filled with expressing problems and ranting about that. I'm adding to the conversation and adding solutions. I'm trying to sell your black ass on the idea that, or the proposal, his proposal, that Black people will be better off in America if we strengthen our numbers in these 9 states. In these 9 states. So what I'm gonna do with this video right here is I'm just gonna add to it. I'm gonna add to his proposal and sell you on the ideal on why Black Americans, North, West, and Midwest need to move down South, specifically to these 9 southern states. So I just want to lay out some facts. Let's lay out some facts, because before I get into my whole spiel, you'd be surprised how many Black folks outside the South have these outdated, misguided views of the South, and it's generally based on media perception, right? It's like, okay, when you think of Mississippi, what do you think of? What's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of Mississippi? Mississippi burning, Emmett Till, the Ku Klux Klan, maybe blues, maybe the Delta. It's really outdated views of Mississippi. You don't think of, for instance, Jackson, Mississippi, which happens to have the largest Black population based on percentage in America. It's a Black as hell city, and their mayor is the son of a Black nationalist who, by the way, was with the Republic of New Africa, who actually created the concept that Charles Blow kind of refined, but they created the concept of Black people moving back to the South. The difference between the Republic of the New Africa and Charles Blow's proposal is that the Republic of New Africa, which started in the late 60s, was a Black nationalist group that wanted to separate from America, and they wanted to create their own country out of Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and South Carolina, right? Which is that's not a bad concept. But the white power structure that is America was not going to succeed those states to Black nationalists. And unfortunately, they did everything that they could to take these people out. A lot of those people, a lot of our brothers and sisters, a lot of our elders who were in that organization, some are still probably locked behind bars and became political prisoners. Shouts out to our elders for fighting a good fight and having us in mind to do better. But when you look at Jackson, Mississippi, the mayor now, the current mayor, he's the son of a Black nationalist. And this brother is a radical, revolutionary, unapologetic brother. Goes by the name of Chokwe Lumumba. That's the mayor, because that's his dad. That was his dad's name, and he's a junior. Chokwe Lumumba. You think your city got a Black mayor, but come on now. It don't get no blacker than that. So that's Mississippi. But people don't think of that. So let me lay down some facts about the South. All right? When we look at the South, I think what a lot of people don't realize is that 56% of the Black population in the United States of America, 56% resides in the South. Now, when you break down the South, according to Census, they do include other states that Charles Blow is not advocating for us to move to, which that includes Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Florida, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, right? However, even if you take those states away and you have the Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, and of course, DC, which is not a state. But when you add those states alone, that is the blackest region in all of the United States. Those are the blackest regions. And those are bordering states, by the way. Those are bordering states. When you look at the rest of the United States, the West, for instance, makes up 10% of the United States. 10% of black people in this country reside in the West, the western half of America. Then you have the Midwest. 17% of black people live in the Midwest. That's 17%. Then you have 17% of black America that lives in the Northeast. So even when you combine Northeast and Midwest in the West population, it still doesn't add up to the South. It still doesn't add up. So when we talk about the concept of strength in numbers, it already exists. 56%. You take away Texas, you take away Oklahoma, you take away Arkansas, you take away Florida, take away West Virginia, Tennessee, and Kentucky, you still have a large concentration of black people in an area called the Black Belt. That is right there, strength in numbers. You know, I'm gonna keep it real. I don't have anything against my brothers and sisters outside the South because I don't get caught up in imaginary lines. I don't get caught up in that shit. But I know it's some naysayers. It's a lot of naysayers because they're afraid of the idea of moving to a red state. And they feel as though, well, we black people need to stay in blue states. We need to stay in liberal states because if we stay there, we can afford the benefits. And that's true for certain individuals, but that's not true for the large collective of black people, even in blue states. Because when you look at those blue states, you look at the Californias, you look at the New Yorks, you look at the Oregons, the Colorados, a large portion of black people in those states still go through racial disparities. Sometimes worse than black folks in southern states, in red states, depending on the city, depending on the metropolitan area. So people have to take that into consideration. This ideology, this concept, this proposal is not about Democrats or Republicans. It's about politicizing our ethnicity for the betterment of the larger community. See, it's not partisan based. That's the problem. That's the problem that a lot of black people can't wrap their mind around. He's proposing that black people move in these states to strengthen the numbers so we could be in control of these states. Why is that important? Why is that important? Because a large percent, see, look, and I'm gonna break this down, I'm gonna break this scene down. But you have to understand that the way things are set up now for black people in this country, we're scattered all over the place. And when you're scattered all over the place like that, especially when you're in a state when, let's say for instance, California, black people only make up 7% of the population in California, 7%. How much power do you think black people in California will have if they only make up 7% of the population? Not a lot. Not a lot. That's why you have a significant amount of black people in California moving out of California cities. They're moving out of Oakland. They're moving out of San Francisco. They're moving out of Los Angeles. They're moving out of San Diego. Why is that? A lot of black people don't have political clout. They don't have political power. Even when LA has a black mayor, who do you think voted for her mostly? You think she became the mayor because of the black vote in LA? When black people only make up like maybe 6% of the population, maybe 9%. I give black people in the LA metropolitan area 9% of the population. You think she won it off that alone? Or did she win it off the backs of other Democratic people? Well, everybody's Democratic in LA. You know what I mean? So black people in LA, and I understand in California abroad, they're doing a reparations task force. I highly doubt that's gonna get passed. It's being considered as far as studying how much something like that would cost, but it's not being approved as far as, yes, black people will be getting reparations. But just think about if you had so many black people moving into these states, and then these states start to become a black majority state. You want to talk about reparations? And I'm going to show you why that's important. Because when we're talking about our day-to-day lives, things that impact our day-to-day living, relying on federal policy is not cutting it. You need to have state. You need to have state power in order to enact some change. You need to create a political blockade within these states that would benefit black people. And you can do that, again, by having black majority states. So let's look at, first of all, let's look at states. Because I told you, I'm trying to sell you on the idea that you need to move your black ass down south. So when we talk about state power, exclusive state power, because there's state power, then there's federal powers, then there's concurrent powers, which is power that state and federal have together. So let's look at the state powers first. What can states do for their general population? So we look at conducting elections, establishing local governments, providing for public safety, health, and welfare, maintaining militia, ratifying constitutional amendments, and regulating interstate commerce. That's what states can do on their own. That's what states have the power to do. Then there's concurrent power, which again, that's state power and federal power. So state or concurrent power is taxation, lawmaking, and enforcement. Hello? Let me say that again. So the state has power to do what? Lawmaking and enforcement. We always talk about hands up, don't shoot, Black Lives Matter. Well, if you had a black majority, certain states could reduce interactions like that if it was led by black people. The right kind of black people, by the way. I just want to say, chartering banks and corporations, taking land for public use, eminent domain, very important, establishing courts, and borrowing money. So states have those powers as well, but those are concurrent powers with federal powers. That's what you can do as state. Now, do you understand why upending the political power structure within these states makes a lot more sense than just, oh, well, I get to live in Brooklyn because in Brooklyn we have black neo soul yoga sessions that I just can't get down south. You know, you can get that in Atlanta, right? But I'm just saying. So another reason why it makes sense and why it could be an easier transition moving to the South is higher learning, higher education. When we think about black people in college, for instance, a lot of times we think about HBCUs, historically black colleges, universities. And the majority of HBCUs are in the South. Why is that important? Because majority of black students entering college tend to attend HBCUs instead of predominantly white institutions, PWIs. Yes, black students attend HBCUs way more than they do PWIs. Well, you have these HBCUs that a large percentage of black Americans attend already. You have them right in your backyard. That's something to think about again. And when we're talking about the percentages of these states, because what does that look like? So we look at Georgia, right? 33% of Georgia's population is black. If you want an example of why that's important compared to, let's say, like a state like New York, right? 17% of New York's population is black. That's under 20%. You see what I'm saying? And that, by the way, those numbers will probably only get smaller since there's a large influx of black people moving out of New York, at least black Americans. But let's continue. So we said Georgia has 33%, North Carolina has 22%, Maryland has 32%, Virginia has 21%, Louisiana has 33%, Alabama has 27%, South Carolina has 27%, Mississippi, which is the blackest state in all of America, has 38%, and Delaware has 25%. Makes a lot of sense, especially when you look at other states. Even my home state of Texas only has 14%. But so black people only make up 14% of the population. So even when you have a state like Texas where Houston and DFW, metropolitan areas, tend to be some of the more promising metropolitan areas for black people. You know, they're up there now. A lot of black people are moving to these two metropolitan areas, and I understand it makes sense. I'm in Houston. I'm born and raised in Texas, East Texas to be exact, which culturally, geographically, and demographically looks a lot like deep South states. I mean, it is a deep Southern state. It's more Southern than it is the stereotypical Texan culture that a lot of people think all of the state has. East Texas is like, nah, it's more like Alabama, Louisiana, Georgia, right? So I understand why he wouldn't pick Texas. Only make up 14% of the population. The Hispanic population now is the largest group in Texas, and it's only getting bigger, right? Then Texas has a very strong economy. They have a strong economy backed by the government, right? Texas state government, you're not going to crack that code. You're not going to break it. Because of the strength in the economy and because the way it's set up and the fact that the Hispanic population now is the largest group, and you're going to start seeing a shift in how local government either goes super hard to protect that white supremacy or start to cater to the Hispanic population, right, to win those votes. Not to mention, and I'm not saying this about all Hispanic people, but there's a lot of whitewashed Hispanics in Texas, right? So, and it's the same reason why you wouldn't include Florida. You know, 17% of the population belongs to black people, right, in Florida. But Florida also, like Texas, has a state government that is just hard to crack. It's hard to crack. It's backed by a lot of economic wins. And it has a very powerful white power structure that you're just not going to crack, especially when you make up only that percentage of the state's population. Whereas in, let's say, Mississippi, I understand Mississippi is losing black people. Mississippi is one of the poorest states in the nation, along with Louisiana. But when you have those numbers, when you have 38% of the population is black, if you added a couple more, you added some more black folks to these states, let's say just Mississippi in particular, what you would start to get is black people who are involved in politics. You would start to see a shift in how politicians would have to answer to some of those black people, because now there's more black people in the state than there are whites. I understand, I get it. Some of y'all are afraid of that concept. I know you are, because I hear y'all. Y'all afraid that y'all gonna move down here, or just the thought that having that many people in one region will cause white people to rise up and act hostile and violent towards us. Well, let me tell you this, if that's how you feel, then what is your black ass doing in America in the first place? What are you doing in America in the first place? If you feel like these white people exist like that, what, black people supposed to just stay stagnant? Because let me tell you, some of those non-southern states, actually all of them, those non-southern states and non-southern cities that you live in, they're not the promised land. I understand that our ancestors and some of y'all grandparents migrated out the South for better opportunities. And a lot of people did get those opportunities, but a lot of people hit a brick wall. And a lot of people realized that when they went up north or when they went to the West Coast or wherever, that leaving the South was pretty much the equivalent of jumping out of the frying pan into the oven, straight up. Some of y'all was subjected and reduced or confined to housing projects. And some of y'all ended up moving back anyway. The descendants of your grandparents, your great-grandparents who migrated out of the South, a lot of descendants are ending up moving back to the South. And there really is no signs of that slowing down. So if the fastest growing cities for black people happen to be in the South, and I'm not saying this idea is perfect. It's not perfect, but it is, in my opinion, black America's last hope. You don't want to move to Africa. I understand it's expensive to do that. You don't feel like that's your home. Your home is here in America, blood, sweat, and tears, yada, 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 whatever. You telling me you can't move down south in the same states, in the same country? You telling me you can't do that? You know what? Because there's some challenges, and I understand. I hear you loud and clear. Because what about this? What about that? I get it. For example, Louisiana. Louisiana has an area called Cancer Alley, are the most impacted and the most vulnerable when it comes to Cancer Alley, when it comes to the really environmental racism in the state of Louisiana. That's something that needs to be fixed ASAP. Even with me telling black people to migrate to the South, I would tell y'all to avoid Louisiana if they're not going to get that fixed. But look at Flint, Michigan. Look at all the environmental racism that exists in this country. It's everywhere. Even in these liberal states, they're there. Black people are exposed to all kind of chemicals and carcinogens and everything in the air. So I understand. Another reason why it would make sense is because, let's say DC. DC has been trying to become a state for a while now. This could be the most practical and realistic option for that to happen. And it would make a lot of sense considering how many black people live in DC and DC metropolitan area. It's huge, especially when you have DC surrounded by a lot of cities and towns with a large percentage of high income black earners. I'm just saying. And I think this is something that he didn't touch on, or I'm not gonna say a challenge, but what I would add to the proposal is to get a brain drain from these non-southern states into the southern states, because you need black people in finance and government and IT and academia. You need black people who are high earners, who have connections in politics and have connection in other realms of higher learning and resources and wealth. You need black people with those resources and wealth. You need to sell them on this proposal. And they should be the first ones to move to these southern states, because they could possibly help put some things in place to make the transition for the working class and middle class to move to these states. Because I'm gonna tell you this right now, you're gonna have tension between the natives and these transplants. I already see that now in cities where black people are doing good, or at least a large amount of black people are doing good. Like I see it in Atlanta, I see it in Charlotte, I see it in Houston, I see it in Dallas, where it's not really violent, but it's these tensions. Well, what if you move a large group of people in cities like New Orleans or Birmingham or Mobile, where they're not doing as good as a Atlanta or Charlotte? Well, then those situations can become hostile, especially in a city like New Orleans, where people don't have, or it's a large amount of people that don't have enough. in comparison to, like I say, Atlanta or Charlotte. But if you set these things up, you help get these things in place where you can accommodate the natives and you can accommodate transplants all at once without anybody feeling left out of feeling like they're going to be replaced, then that needs to be emphasized. You need to sell those people with access to resources and wealth. You need to sell them on moving first. It can be done, people. Perfect example, Deion Sanders. I know Deion Sanders went to Colorado. I understand that. But when he went to Jackson State, not only did he become a success story for Jackson State, but he became a success story for the whole city. He brought a lot of money to Jackson, Mississippi. Think about that. Deion Sanders, just him coming there, brought millions of dollars to Jackson, Mississippi. I mean, that was good for Jackson's economy. So that's something to think about. The Deion formula. Could those things work in other places in the South? I think it can. And I'm going to end it off with this. Former U.S. Senator Carol Moseley Braun. This is a former U.S. Senator, she was the first African-American woman elected to the chamber. She was on the documentary, and she made this statement here. The two-party system operating the way it does, there are no options for black voters. And unfortunately, so that you know, it's like the devil you know versus the devil you don't. Our dispersal all over the country essentially diluted our ability to influence elections. This is a former U.S. Senator, which, by the way, she's a former U.S. Senator of Illinois, saying this, which is something I've said before. Maybe not in those words, but I've said this. The way that black politicians operate in this country is really from a weak standpoint. They really got their hands tied behind their back. So they really look powerless. That's why you can see Joe Biden talk to these people like they're children and tell them, look, y'all need to get y'all black constituents, y'all need to get those Negroes in line and have them catering to the Asian and Hispanic population because they're growing. We got y'all niggas because y'all niggas vote for Democrats overwhelmingly more than any other group of people. You know, Hispanics and Asians, they're a little bit more split when it comes to these parties. But y'all black ass is going to stay loyal to me. That's how Joe Biden talked to him, condescending. I say, check out this documentary, South to Black Power. Charles Blow, the brother, also has a book entitled The Devil You Know. There's also Frederick Delk, who also proposed the idea of black people moving and creating a contiguous super region, a black majority super region. Look him up on Twitter, Frederick Delk. He has some pretty good information too. He's a black conservative though, I'm gonna tell you straight up, but the brother has some good information. But yeah, y'all check out South to Black Power. It's on HBO Max. It's a good, interesting look, I'm telling you. And something to consider. All right, I'm out. Till next time, holla.